we have a breaking news development, and this is something that we are covering on Primetime as well. From ICICI Bank, the ICICI Bank board has appointed Mr. Sandeep Bakshi as whole-time director and chief operating officer of ICICI Bank. We have Vishy with us in the studio. We're also going to have all the guests on the show. Vishy, what do you make of this development?
So the main point of this statement is that Chanda Kochhar has been asked to go on indefinitely till the point in time that the investigation is over. It's important to note that she's going to continue as the MD and CEO of bank, even though she's on leave. Sandeep Bakshi will take over as the chief operating officer for the duration of this entire investigation. And till this investigation is over, he will only report to the board of ICICI Bank. Alongside NS Kannan, who's the executive director at the bank at this point in time, has been recommended as the CEO who will take over ICICI Prudential. Now, these are all points that are coming out from the statement, but interesting to see that the board has decided to continue with Kochhar as the MD and CEO of the bank, even though there was a lot of buzz about her stepping down, at least for the duration of the investigation.
Vishy, stay with us. We also have guests joining us on the show just to analyze this development. On the phone line, we have with us VG Kannan, Chief Executive at IBA. Mr. Kannan, thanks so much for speaking to us, Chief Executive Officer at the IBA, of course. Mr. Kannan, what do you make of this development, considering that they have sent Ms. Kochhar on indefinite leave?
I think this was already in the offing in the last few days. Since an investigation is on the chief of the bank, so it's only appropriate the chief steps aside for the period of investigation. And they have brought in another person. Only thing is they have named it as a chief operating officer, reporting to the MD and CEO. And in the meantime, since CEO has been asked to go on leave, he will probably report to the board. So what actually will happen after the investigation is over, and in the event it's found that everything is absolutely kosher, and then we will have to see whether the position of Sandeep Bakshi will hold, or will there be any other change, or is it an interim position to take over? It's still not very clear. But the thing is, he has been asked to come and probably look after the bank till such time as the entire investigation gets over.
Right, Mr. Kannan, do stay on. We also have Mr. Hemendra Hazari, independent banking analyst, with us on the phone. Mr. Hazari, firstly, your reaction on the board's decision to continue with the MD and CEO, Chanda Kochhar, at her position and not asking her to step down.
See, this just tells you how complicit and how compliant the board is, that even with such serious allegations against your CEO, you're not willing to allow that person to really step down, and you try to make things most comfortable for the CEO. And therefore, you're placing the importance of a single individual and giving that person far more importance than the institution. Now, this is the state of corporate governance in India. This is the state of boards. And even this temporary movement of getting somebody else in is because of the amount of public pressure that thankfully the media has highlighted. It is only because of that this board has finally agreed to even this. And this is what I have to say. The corporate governance in India is a total sham. It is just a cover-up. But one thing, at least I'm glad to see that some positive movement has come out of this.
All right, Mr. Hazari. Mr. Kannan, if we could get your take on that as well. Mr. Hazari was talking about the corporate governance situation, especially in the country, in light of this development. Do you share that sentiment, Mr. Kannan?
See, unless it's all, we always say the person is innocent till proven guilty. So the person has actually been asked to go on leave till such time as the issues being investigated and sorted out. So let's give the benefit of doubt. And if the board has confidence in the CEO, despite what have been the allegations, I think they have taken what probably they feel is the right step to have an interim person, and also at the same time asking the CEO to go on leave. And therefore, they will be in a position to meet the corporate governance of ensuring that there's no interference, if at all, is expected when the CEO remains when there's allegations against the person.
Mr. Kannan, just a question from my side, Vishwanath here. What powers does a CEO on leave actually have? It's not like she's been taken away from that position. That position is still very much hers, even though she's going to be away from the bank till the investigation is over. But it could be expected that there might be some powers that she may exert on the current management of the bank.
Any organization, when the CEO is completely on leave, unless he comes back to duty, he or she comes back to duty, normally does not exercise anything, any powers. And if at all there's any emergency, it's probably done by the next person or by the board. So in this case, I think the Sandeep Bakshi will probably be acting like the CEO for all practical purposes till such time she's on leave. So I don't think so. MD and CEO will actually be having any powers whatsoever during the period when she's on leave.
Mr. Hazari, your point on this, the MD and CEO of the bank still there, even though she's on leave. What do you think? What kind of powers does a CEO on leave have?
See, given the circumstances that she has gone on leave, she should not be having any powers, because there is going to be an external agency investigating her role and her immediate family's role. Therefore, she should not have any powers, because then she can influence the investigation. So under such murky circumstances and very sorry circumstances, in my opinion, such a CEO does not deserve to have any powers, and therefore the powers will rest either with the board in her leave of absence or with whoever has been deputed. And if she has and she's exercising powers as a CEO, then it defeats the entire purpose of her going on leave.
Mr. Hazari, while Vishu was making that point about what kind of powers the CEO on leave has, the media release for our viewers does talk about what Mr. Bakshi will be doing. Mr. Bakshi will be responsible for handling all the businesses and corporate center functions at the bank. All executive directors on the board of ICICI Bank and the executive management will report to him. Mr. Bakshi will report, though, to Ms. Chanda Kochhar, who will continue in her role as MD and CEO of ICICI Bank. Mr. Hazari, I just want your take on this. Considering this has happened now, and we've been tracking this development at Bloomberg right from the start, is it a case of too little, too late, you'd say?
Obviously, it is far too little and extremely late. But as I said, this exposes how corporate governance is actually practiced in the corporate boardrooms in India. But what to do? I mean, you would have expected a board to have ordered her to step down. When the board did not do that, you would have expected the banking regulator, the RBI, to do it. The RBI is just a mute spectator in all this. This whole thing puts the entire corporate Indian banking in very poor light.
Let's quickly go to Mr. Kannan. Mr. Kannan, just one question on this. Mr. Hazari mentioned the role of the RBI in this entire conversation. Of course, the board in a statement also says that Mr. Bakshi will need regulatory approvals. But how soon do you think the RBI is likely to give a go-ahead on something like this, especially considering that the situation is quite volatile at the bank?
First of all, he become the whole-time director, which can be done by any person. Like the board itself can make them the whole-time director. But making the same person as a chief operating officer, unless if it's going to be CEO, then the RBI's approval would be needed. And therefore, they have circumvented that portion and made them as the chief operating officer. And probably going to the RBI for a permission to see that the person can probably exercise the powers of CEO in the absence of CEO. So I don't know whether the position of the CEO meets the requirement of the RBI approval. I've not seen the orders also, so I can't really say anything about it.
Mr. Hazari, just one last question to you as well. Mr. Bakshi, was there a need to bring in somebody from outside the bank as such to take over the position of a COO? Why not just elevate somebody who's already at the bank?
I would have preferred somebody senior in ICICI Bank to have at least come in as an interim CEO. Mr. Sandeep Bakshi's conduct in ICICI Prudential, in my opinion, has not been very good. The media has thoroughly exposed the rampant mis-selling of life insurance policies by ICICI Prudential in the state of Rajasthan. There is a very major police investigation of the Special Operations Group in Rajasthan, which is investigating the matter, which shows that it is systemic. It is widespread. They have targeted very poor farmers to mis-sell policies. Mr. Sandeep Bakshi was well aware what was going on. A whistleblower reported it, who was a former employee of the company. Sandeep Bakshi put a criminal complaint against him. That person was put in jail for 30 days. The High Court then, said in a judgment that there was actually no evidence at all to have put him in jail. So these are the kind of practices, which has been happening under Mr. Sandeep Bakshi. Now, for such an individual to have been brought in and supposed to be fit and proper to head as a CEO of an interim bank, I think it is a very poor choice of picking an individual.
Right. Okay, I'll just close this with one last question to both you gentlemen. What is your expectation from the independent inquiry that has been initiated by the bank? Justice Sri Krishna has been appointed as the head of this investigation. Of course, he still has to form his team. But what is your broad expectation? Firstly, with Mr. Hazari, and then we'll go to Mr. Kannan.
No, sorry, could you repeat the question?
I want to know what your expectation is from the independent inquiry that has been initiated by the bank. Justice Sri Krishna, what is your expectation from that team?
Well, I expect Justice Sri Krishna, given his reputation, given his credibility, to do a very thorough investigation, because these allegations appear extremely serious. Now, if he is going to behave like all the rest of the independent directors have so far behaved on ICICI Bank in giving Chanda Kochhar a clean sheet without any kind of thorough investigation, then it will reflect poorly on his own credibility. And, given his reputation and his general credibility in India, I expect him to do a very thorough job and come up with an appropriate, conclusion, which can finally put this matter at rest.
Right. Mr. Kannan, your point of view? Could you quickly join?
I'll also go with him and basically saying that we expect Justice Sri Krishna to do an excellent job, and because of his experience and reputation, and to ensure that the entire thing is behind us and we go on with other issues. Because for the last few months, I think more than any business or something, this is what is being the focus for the entire banking industry. And therefore, it's essential that Justice Sri Krishna comes with a clear-cut, what do you call, the investigation and a report as to what actually transpired, and give the recommendations to the board to take suitable action.
All right, Mr. Kannan, Ms. Hazari, thanks so much for joining us live on Bloomberg Quint. Vishy, thanks so much for the analysis as well. This is perhaps the biggest corporate story of the day, and it's happened
quite late in the night.
It's happened quite late in the night. Thank you for joining us. For all of you watching, you can always log on to bloombergquint.com if you want you want to track the story. It's on Facebook, Twitter, Bloomberg Quint, and of course, it's always on www.bloombergquint.com. Just to wrap it up for you, well, as of now, and this is a story that has just broken, Ms. Chanda Kochhar has decided to go on leave till the completion of the inquiry. And of course, in the interim, they have the ICICI Bank board, based on the media release, has appointed Mr. Sandeep Bakshi as whole-time director and chief operating officer of ICICI Bank. Chanda Kochhar will continue as the managing director and CEO on leave. What does that entail? Well, that's there in this conversation. And also, she will go on leave, of course, till the completion of this inquiry. For all of you watching, thanks so much for tuning in, and stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint.